E.
Welcome to another episode of Two Tired Teachers. I'm Vinay.
And I'm Rumi.
And we're back at it again. I'm going to put this out here. We're trying to stay consistent, as consistent as we can. Dealing with what we have to deal with, we're trying to stay consistent. That's all I'll say. I'll just leave it at that. Today, we have a topic that Rumi is going to be talking about. I'm putting this one all on her, since this is one thing that she feels very strongly about, and which all teachers should feel strongly about it, but she really is passionate about it and she does well with it. So I'm going to leave a lot of this up to her. Today, we want to talk a little bit about item analysis. And I think this is important right now because, especially if you're in Texas, and I don't know what's happening in other states because I haven't specifically asked, with the legislation that has been passed for educators over the summer that led into this current school year, much of what we do is going to be very highly scrutinized, and we're going to have to do a lot of analysis to make sure that we're doing the things that these House bills that have been passed for us, that we're doing it, that we're following it almost to the letter of the law, so that we don't have any issues by the end of the year. So the item analysis part of testing and gathering information about your students this year for us is very important. So I feel like this is a good time. It's the beginning of the year. Most schools are just starting or just have been in maybe only a few weeks. So this is a good time to start wrapping your head around this kind of item analysis type thing. We even have specific lesson plans and records that we have to keep because of this legislation that has gone down. And this is going to be very helpful as you're doing whatever it is that you're doing to get those kids where they have to be according to these House bills that have passed. So when we're talking about item analysis, basically, I love giving a technical overall overarching kind of definition of whatever it is that we're talking about. So when you're talking about item analysis, you're talking about analyzing student responses as they respond to whatever kind of exam questions that have been given. And you're looking for the intention of the test, and you're looking at the quality of the test. Now, we know, both of us, and we've had this conversation over and over again, sometimes we can't control the quality of the test. Now, if you write the test and you're a good test writer, I know for sure I'm not a good test writer. I've never been good at writing test questions. I've been told that they are too hard. My questions are way too hard. So I know that I'm not a good test writer. But we also know that some tests that we are given to give to our students aren't any better. So we still have to use them, and we have to be able to analyze them and get the data that we need so that we can guide our instruction. So what about that?
Well, I have always been one of those teachers that look at the item analysis, and with me it's specifically separated. It's item analysis when I'm looking at the questions, and analysis of student work when I'm looking at what the kids did with the question. Both work completely different for me. The first one maybe looks like that I'm exaggerating, but it actually makes my teacher life a lot easier, especially when I have to know where my group is standing with questions. I always use questions that come from our state test assessment because I think that's the norm, not because it's anything else. I don't think it's a brilliant thing, but that's the norm. So if we're going to be measuring, when I'm saying we, it's kids and teachers, and measured by that one. So let's analyze it and let's figure out how we tackle that one.
Yes.
Now with the new legislation, I completely agree with you. It's pretty much not specifically said in the legislation, but it's you better do it and you better know it. And you better have that work somewhere in some kind of archive put away in case of. So for me, big fan of it. And I get that it will ask for a little bit more time when you are planning. But with time and when you have the experience, I think in my case, I can pretty much narrow it down to what, 5 more minutes, something like this, for 5 questions as exit tickets for the week. So it does not, it's not that big of a deal for me. And I know that it's making it easier for me to understand where my group is standing. And then with the kids and their work, it's not that I'm doing it every time. I'm doing it just with the big tests, like the benchmarks or checkpoints if I want to go ahead. So it's once or twice per year or 3 times per year. So it's not that big of a deal for me. But yes, it makes my life a lot easier.
And I'll just throw this in. Some of us have platforms that will give us item analysis of any of the assessments that we take. But I think we're looking at this from a different perspective, because generally when you see those item analysis, it's just telling you how many students got number 1 wrong or right, and what was the answer that they chose. And sometimes, and that works well if you're just going by the Scantron and that alone. I get that. But sometimes it's necessary to see their actual work and go through the strategies that they actually used when they put pencil to paper to see where there may be a misconception or a miscalculation or those kind of things, because that can give you a whole different set of data. So I am aware, or we are aware, that there are platforms that we are using, because we both have them, that we could just Scantrons, run the scans, push a button, and it'll pop up for us and put them in random groups and so forth and so on. But sometimes you want to know a little bit more than that, because that doesn't always tell the whole story.
So I'm going to try to share an example of exit ticket with the item analysis, so everybody can see pretty much what we're talking about when it comes to item analysis per question. And in my case, I'm showing the exit ticket and how I'm working through it. Fingers crossed, I'll get it. Here we go. This is an exit ticket on a question, and the question is straightforward for our state assessment. It's for 5th grade. Now, if you can see, pretty much you kind of as a teacher work around the whole thing, so you will know what the correct answer possibly will look like for the kid, and then you mark what is the correct answer of the question. Now, of the other answers, you try to figure out what are they doing. So for example, in this one, if the kid choose G, it will be because they're adding, and they're adding just specific numbers, okay? If they choose H, the calculation, it's an error. So somewhere they regrouped incorrectly. And then J says that it's added just on 1 step instead of doing 2 steps to get to the answer. That's what a item analysis looks like. You're literally looking at the question. Now, when you read that, and this is specifically for me because my career has been in bilingual education, and I have to figure out if the question can make sense to my bilingual kids, because we have a lot of those problems, and it's pretty much unintentional. It's just how the questions are structured. So I obviously give a lot of example with the questions when it comes to sports, and the question is about football and how many yards somebody run. For my kids, that is kind of far away because they're not looking at American football. They're more of a soccer fans. So that type of question is very difficult for them to understand unless they have some kind of experience with the sport here. But that's just an example. So when I read, first thing I have to figure out, is there something that my kids will not understand as a vocabulary, as an example, whatever it is. And if I get something like that, I make sure to include other questions like this in my teaching moments so my kids will get used to them.
Yeah.
And then this item analysis pretty much helps me at the end of the day when we do the exit ticket. And I know I'm just going to say it straightforward. So what I did, because this is how I work in the classroom, they will have the exit ticket, okay? They know that they have to give it to me, nothing else. And by the last moment of the time for exit ticket, I do the 4 corners for them. And with my classroom, on the 4 corners, I have sticky notes, a pad that it's put there. So I just say, go to your corners, and they go to your corners, separating each other by the answer that they gave. And they just write their names on the sticky note. So for me, that it's immediately my small groups for the next day, because I know from each group I have to work what, so I can figure out why they're not getting the correct answer on that specific question. It's practical. It has been worked all the time for me. I do that with the exit tickets, the item analysis, and I do the same thing with the tests that I specifically choose to look at, just to see how the question is built, what the answers will tell me. Even before looking at the student work, I kind of figure out, okay, so if they use that answer, then this is what we're missing. I need to work on that, and so on and so on. I usually choose to do the first checkpoint, the first benchmark, the January checkpoint, and the second benchmark. So it's not that much, difference.
And I want to also stress an important point that you made as far as looking at these questions beforehand, so that, and again, if you're not making these assessments, you are limited to the amount of time in between when you see it and when you have to give it in some instances. So if you get it early enough so that you can, like you said, look at it and see if there's any information in there that maybe your students don't have experience with, that you could throw in a lesson, that is also part of the item analysis part, because we know that there are biases in tests. We know that, like Rumi is doing the ESL population, they just don't have experience with some American things that are common to us that we might put on a test. They might not have experience with that. So that is also a big chunk of the item analysis, is looking at it ahead of time so that you are aware. Now, again, I put it out there. Some tests we know we don't get it until the day before, because they don't want you to see what it is. And you kind of just, in your lessons, you kind of have to guess this could possibly be in there. But like we spoke about, I think last week, if you've been in a grade level over time, historically kind of what they're going to always put on the test. So you can kind of gauge it that way. But that is a big part of the item analysis, looking ahead of time and knowing what to expect, why they might choose this answer, why they might choose this answer. And again, teachers that have humongous classes, we know it could be time consuming, but at the tail end of it, it's probably going to work out for your benefit. Because when you're doing your reteach, when you're putting kids in groups, rather than me to try to teach a whole entire concept, I might just need to clear up one little misconception, and then we can move on, rather than trying to do the whole thing all over again, which is what takes up our time and which causes us to be frustrated. Because you have these kids sitting in a group and you're trying to go through a whole lesson all over again, and you're not understanding why they're not paying you any attention, because they don't need that part. They just need this one little part. and then you can send them
Exactly.
on their way. And that's what makes this so powerful.
I'm so glad that you said that, because this has been for me why the item analysis. Because if you go to the kids that got the correct answer and the kids that did not get the correct answer. So the kids that got the correct answer, you know that they're close to mastery. You just have to repeat to be sure, but they're close to mastery. But then the whole other group, if you don't look at the item analysis, like they didn't get it, so I have to reteach everything. Instead of making the smaller group even smaller, because you have the kids that they added. So I'm just going to work of what did not understood, and they added instead of subtracting. That's it. And most probably it's because of the reading of the question.
Vocabulary, exactly what I was going to say. It's probably some
So
vocabulary.
I'm just working on that. Then I get the kids that had the calculation incorrect. So instead of going through everything concept, I'm like, okay, sit down, let's look at the calculation. What happened here? And most of the times the kids will say, oh, I didn't do that. Okay, so now do it correctly. And we're done and gone. You don't have to go through every single thing and reteach everything for 15 kids, for example, and majority of them will be like, because it does not concern them. So for me, that's why the item analysis has become very important, because I'm not overwhelming them with things that they really don't need. And sometimes it has been like, especially when it comes to calculation error, it's like, oh, it's just a simple error, and you can actually put these kids in almost mastery group. It just was some calculation that was like, I forgot that, or oh my God,
they didn't line the place values up, and
yes, or it was just some kind of multiplication error that they were, oh my God, I did not thought of things like this. So that's why this item analysis has been very, very important for me. And the other part that I'm looking at is because I use questions, that the release question from our state assessments, like it or not, you start kind of building in the kids okay, this is the level and we have to deal with it. And with time, they start to understand more and more and more how the questioning those state assessments or big assessments are done. So you don't have to kind of guess all the time. It just helps you build that knowledge in the kids.
Right. So is it anything else we need to say about it? It's just something that, everybody should try to do at least on one assessment to get used to it, because in the long run, I think it's going to save you some time. It's going to save you some time.
Oh, sorry. I think the item analysis, you have to start out with your daily exit ticket or whatever assessment you have at the end of the lesson, not going straight out to the tests or whatever you have. Just try. When I started with it, I started with 2 per week. And I knew that those will be the most important ones for me, because this is how I'm going to build my small groups. So I did just 2 per week. And it literally for us is not, it doesn't take that much of a time. And if you have a calculator, it's even easier. But, and then I kind of progressed to, okay, so I'm going to do 3 because I need 3. And then I thought, okay, I'm doing all of them. For me, the item analysis, the most important to start building that experience as a teacher. Just do it for whatever your exit ticket is for the lesson.
Yeah.
Small, 1 question, that's it. The most important question that you have, do it for that one. And that's it, and move on. Then when it comes time to the test, you kind of have already the stamina and you know what you're doing. So it does not become that big of a deal. Me. While the kids are taking the test, I'm taking the test. They're trying to solve it. I'm trying to solve it because I'm doing the item analysis with them. So it doesn't take that much of a time when it's a test that is done for them.
Yeah, I think it's important. And it's definitely something that, we should care about, and especially if you're in Texas this year.
we will pretty much have to. So that's the part of item analysis. And then the second thing that I do is looking at the student work. And
Yeah.
it's kind of a little bit different. And it's a time consuming. So you have to make your mind that, okay, I'm going to sit for 2 hours and look through that.
Yeah.
And I literally get their booklets or whatever it is that they use, and it's always on paper. And I know that last year we kind of went online, but even with that, they have the paper where they have to solve the problems. And if you teach them specific way of solving the problems, it becomes very evident. So I literally sit down, open the booklet, and I start looking question after question after question to see what they're doing. And I'm looking for two things. The ordering strategies. Now, mind you, I don't care which strategy they're using.
Right.
Because usually I show them at least 2 to 3 strategies to solve one problem, one approach to a problem. So I don't care which one is it. I'm just looking at what they did. And I make notes to the side of each one of the problems. Obviously, when it's a correct, I'm kind of scrolling through it, but I look more in where I have an incorrect answer so I can figure out why is it incorrect. And once I have that, I make on the back of the test, I make kind of a graph, a very fast graph with at least the 4 places, 4 biggest mistakes, the ones that have been repeating each other through the whole test. And I kind of put them together. So one of the big ones in the beginning of the year, it's the order of operations.
Yes.
Because you have the order of operations, but it's never in order in the test. You are one side and another side. And you look and say, oh, they got lost because they're not literally following the way that it's presented. It's like, okay, so I need to go and reinforce with this kid the order of operation, how to do it exactly in order. And if it's necessary, underline the one you're doing.
Right.
And everything else drops down the same. And then underline and drops the same.
Right.
If that's necessary to keep the order, that's what I'm doing. If I'm looking at multiplication, incorrect in multiplication, especially with decimals, that's the one that kind of takes more time. So I'm making those notes at the back of each student test. And where with progression goes, for the next one that I'm analyzing, I kind of put them together to figure out how many of the first mistakes were corrected. And if I have not corrected the first mistakes, then what is happening here? Because obviously by now it's not the kid. If I did my job, it's not going to be the kid. So what am I doing? Why am I not reaching that kid? So pretty much I will spend, and I want to say not that much time, but it takes me probably around 2 to 3 hours to go through my 30 students and look through it and make the notes. Now, those stay with me. I don't send them home. And if I send them home, parents sign in that they saw it and then they will return to me. It's part of their portfolio. And when I start working with the kids again in small groups or sometimes in big groups, these are the answers, the problems that I'm using, the ones that the kids did not get in the test. So we're reworking it on the test. They're using a color pencil and we're going step by step. Okay, so what's next? What's next? What you're doing? What you're doing? And when they get to the point where they realize, oh, I did not do that. Oh, I didn't. Then I made them write it down. I did not do that. It's pretty much like a self-reflection.
Yeah.
Like just write it down. And I keep those with me for the whole year. Those are the last ones that go home somewhere in the end of the year. Why am I doing that? There are 2 things. First of all, because I want to know my students and where they're standing. And the only way to know it, a part of when you build relationship with them and you're observing them in the classroom, it's to see the paper. I want to know where they have problems and understanding a problem when it's on paper, and I want to know if the problems in the test relate to what their experience in life is, because that has been one of the biggest problems for me to solve. I have to go around. If it wasn't me, our test would not look like they're looking right now, but it's that,
Exactly. Yeah.
And the other thing is because sometimes, no, majority of the times you will notice that there were certain things that you as a teacher miss when were you teaching them.
Right.
The example that I did was not correct, even though I thought it was getting to them. Or maybe the strategy that we were using at time, it's way over their heads. I need to go back. It's kind of looking at where they're standing, but where they're standing because of what I did. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And as you're thinking about your own professional goals, because we all have to do the goal setting stuff at the beginning of the year, that is a part of that. That should be, I'll put it like that. That should be a part of your reflection piece when you get new year and you have to do that self-reflection, teacher self-reflection. That's part of the stuff that goes in there, because you do have to make the call as to whether it's the student or was it my delivery. Because sometimes it's my delivery and I have to be aware of that and come back and do it a different way. So that was a good point to make.
But no, I have a rule with me, and it's my rule, and probably it's exaggerated. But if I'm looking at something and close to 50% of the kids, close to 50% of the kids are not getting it, it's me. It's me. Because it's impossible if it's correct, if I did it correctly, if I will not have 48% of kids not getting it.
Yeah.
That's not reality. So my rule is, I have heard from other educators go, well, if 60% of the group did not get it to 70%, now for me it's a 40. Because if I wait for the 60%, I'm way behind to fix it.
Right.
So for me, it's like, if it gets close to 50 that the kids did not get, so I'm redoing that one. Whatever I did or whatever I said did not get to the point. I need to figure out a way to doing that. And maybe sounds exaggerated, because like, okay, but 60% got it. I'm like, hey, maybe let me make sure, because 60% is not a comfortable place for me. So it's like, I'm making sure that everybody gets that.
And when you're thinking about that kind of stuff and you have to go back and do something, I think we should not get stuck in our head that this is going to be another whole week-long process. It just may be a simple conversation that you might have to fix that, like I said earlier, misconception, and then you can just move on and then give another exit ticket maybe the next day or whatever about that same thing to make sure. And then you may be at your little 20% and you work with them in a small group and you're done.
When it gets to me, and it's kind of the one example for each year where I already know it's going to happen. Maybe it's happening to you too, I don't know. When we start using mixed numbers to add and subtract with different denominators, my first presentation is to go the whole way. So this is the whole number, the fraction. If you need to regroup from the whole number and then equivalent fractions and everything, and then they make the whole thing, so they can kind of follow the process. But the process is very tedious.
It is.
It is. So once I see the majority, even though you can hear, because they have to go through the whole process, and it becomes tedious. But once you start hearing those, it's like, okay, they're getting it. They're understanding that it's too much work through it, but they're getting it, because if they didn't know it, they will finish it in 1 minute and it's done and gone, which means they don't have attention. But once they realize it's too much work, it takes more time, like now they know what they're doing. So immediately after, I give them the option of converting the mixed numbers to improper fractions and deal with that. And the whole reaction always is like, why didn't you tell us that before? I'm like, because I wanted you to learn that
Right,
part.
because you still
But
need
then
to
it's
go
like-
the other way. Yeah, you still need to
Yes,
go the other way.
but it every year is the same thing. Every year is the same thing. And I wait and I know, okay, I need to look up everybody if they're going through the whole process. But once it exists and you give them the other solutions, you were torturing us. You tortured. No, I did not. I'm just waiting for you to be ready to go for that one.
Because it's more torture for me trying to get you to the point where you need to be.
I
than
get
it
it.
is for
I
you.
understand. But it's like of those for us, it's not a big deal. You know why you're converting mixed number to improper
Right.
fraction and vice versa. But for them to get to that point, you have to go through the process. There is nothing, but
Right.
you can see that it's like, oh, we don't have to do all of that. Yes, now that you understand, you don't have to. But it's part of me knowing, and that's why I'm looking at their work. And it's not just the test. The test is kind of a checkpoint for me too. But when you go around and you look at what they're doing while they're working independent practice or team or whatever it is, you do the same thing. You look and you kind of make notes. Okay, this is something that they're struggling with. I need to go back and figure out, because there is no way, if they understand it, majority of the group will be in a good place. If they take too much time, they have to talk to the partners, they have to have a teamwork to go and or they choose their answers because the higher kids chose that answer, like, yeah, not working, I go back.
Right. So if you do all of this, say with your exit tickets, with your independent practices and those kind of things, if you are doing those item analysis, then it's saving you some time when you actually get to the big test, because there'll be less for you to have to analyze if they've gotten the information up front. And I think that's our big umbrella.
Yes.
That's the point of this whole
Yes,
thing. If
and
you're doing it leading up to the test, there'll be less of it you have to do in the actual test.
yes, and with time you realize if I'm doing it on the exit ticket, by the test I fixed it.
Right.
So I don't have to look that much in the
Right.
test, because I use all this time strategically looking at the item analysis and their work on the exit ticket, so I can work with them. By the time we get on the test, we don't have these gaps anymore there. So
Right.
it will help a lot. In my experience, one of the best practices for me to know and to fix in the moment while I'm working. So the test to come with the results that they come with my classrooms.
Right. Right. So I think we've said everything we can say about that.
Exactly. It was short, it was nice, and we're
Yeah.
encouraging to do that.
Yes, we definitely
Try
encourage you to do that. Save some of your own sanity.
Try it.
And I'm gonna say it again, especially if you're in Texas, save yourself some sanity. Yeah,
You will have to either way.
yeah.
So-
yeah, you will have to.
It.
So hopefully that was helpful.
Mhm.
And if, as we always say, if you have any questions, comments, you want us to go further with it, you want Rumi to give you some more examples, put it in the comments and we'll be glad to do that for you. And Rumi, if there's nothing else, I guess we're signing out as Two Tired Teachers, and we will see you on the next time.
Bye, people.